the regular scheduled meeting, right?
Yep.
You guys will have to read most of it today because my allergies are so bad I can't see without my glasses, and I can't wear my glasses with this. So
I know, that's gonna be my problem.
right for your house.
No, shut up.
Damon,
Yeah.
hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
I just shared with you you got it?
Yep.
So you can follow it, because we're casting it over here, that's why.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
I know, I watched Fedwa Hamoud's, I listened to that was like, wow. We're done with this online crap, right? And now we have to start over. It does it? Okay. Okay,
Okay.
no problem. All right, are we ready? Okay, good evening and welcome to this evening's study session. I call this meeting to order at 5:39. Ms. Janoon, please take roll.
Okay. Mrs. Berry,
Here.
Mrs. Elzayat.
She's absent.
Yeah, she's absent tonight.
Okay, sorry. I can't see that side of the
Oh,
screen.
sorry, okay.
So it's okay. Mrs. Fawaz,
Here.
myself, Ms. Kaminsky,
Here.
and Mr. Sabah.
Here.
Madam Chair, I have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to start off with Dr. Masala and his presentation. Staffing ratios, right? Presentation? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Board. Good evening, community. So we have 3 presentations for you today. The first one's a little longer than the others, just because we're going to go into detail about our staffing ratios, cost balance, to illustrate where we're at with our staffing in relationship to our budgets and our student numbers. Second presentation, and then in that first presentation, Mrs. O'Hare and Dr. Lazar will assist and go into detail on a couple other areas, and Mrs. Morgan will be available to answer any questions in reference to the budgets if there was something that wasn't answered. The second presentation will be on our ESSER funding. There'll be an explanation of funds we've received, expenditures, and then next steps for ESSER 3. And then the third is in the presentation is this discussion on an item you received in one of your Friday updates from Dr. Lazar in reference to moving forward with whom we'd like to go with to help us rewrite our policies, as we did some research to identify the 2 major firms that tend to do this. So I will begin with staffing ratios and balanced cost effectiveness. So what to know? A few things. Staffing is based off of these criteria. Number 1, we'd like to maintain an ideal balanced class size ratios at all levels, and you should have a copy of this PowerPoint in your packet to look at as well. We would love to see, and again, these are ideal balanced class sizes. Kindergarten through 3rd grade being a 1 teacher to 24 student ratio because of the need for early literacy and more individualized small group support. Grades 4 and 5, 1 to 26 ratio, and then grades 6 through 12, a 1 to 28 ratio. Now, the research on class sizes states that there's a major difference in student achievement coming class sizes for the positive when you have under 18 or under, and negative when you're over 32. So that's why 18 or under isn't cost effective. It's very difficult to maintain that with current budget systems. Over 32, if that tends to happen, as you'll see, is because either you don't have enough staffing or infrastructure needs. So you'll see where our staffing ratios are compared to that idea. 2, we identify needs of at-risk students to support. So this is where we use categorical funding to support human resources of up to 85% of those budgets, and I will go into detail on that. But that's the grant-funded categoricals such as Title I, 31A, so on and so forth. Usually, and based on research, when you use those budgets to create additional supports, additional people to help students, either it be for academic, social, or emotional, that goes a much longer way than it does purchasing things. So what you'll see is about we are very close to that 80-85% range, and then the 15 to 20% additional is what we use for supplemental materials, technology, programming, so on, assessments, and I'll go into a little detail, but to be very, I always ask the community to be very cognizant, because these categorical funds, they have specific requirements that we must follow, and they're earmarked for certain things. And one key thing that that the state and the federal government constantly reiterates to us is supplanting versus supplementing. So for example, you can't use categorical funding for your base curriculum. If you do, that's supplanting. But if you purchase an assessment system to identify and to support students' growth, and it's not part of the state mandated assessments, then that's supplementing. So a lot of times people don't understand, well, you have this money in Title I, why don't you use it to pay more teachers? Or you can't, because that's you're then supplanting. So we'll talk about that a little bit as well. The third thing that we always look at is we identify trends for future staffing. So we look at our projections, but we also look at the trends. What has the trend been for the last 3 to 5 years for that grade level, for that school, for that community? We also look at trends in reference to real estate market. Though that plays a role into it as well. Additionally, we look at trends in reference to where are our current K-1-2 numbers, and what can we be expecting moving forward for upper L as well as the K-1-2. And then fourth, we look at infrastructure and capacity needs. Where are we in terms of infrastructure? Do we have enough classrooms? Do we have enough space to put more classrooms? Do we have enough space to have more teachers? And one thing that you'll see is that we are understaffed in a couple areas, and that is because of infrastructure. And that's why the board, thankfully, we really appreciate your support in the addition of those classrooms, because that's going to help us with those numbers as well. So how we staff. So again, we look at all the elements discussed in the previous slide, but then we also look at staff according to the number of students actually in class. We don't ever staff our district based on what's in MyStar. MyStar is our county system that has all the students' names, so on and so forth. And the projections we use are based off of these trends. So for example, if in MyStar it says, we have 4,000 students and we narrow it down to a specific school, we then go into that school and identify how many students are actually there. And what our schools also do is they reach out to families who have not shown up yet to find out, hey, what's going on? And a lot of times families will tell us, we'll be back in a week, we'll be back in 2 weeks, we're overseas, so on and so forth. And then number two, sometimes we have, now in this current environment, this is what makes it a little bit more difficult for us when it comes to staffing. In our current environment, there's a limited number of teachers available because of the shortage of teachers, the number of teachers coming out of university. I remember in 2006, you would have the University of Michigan Dearborn alone had a graduating class from the School of Education of over 300 students. I can tell you that in the last couple of years, it's ranged anywhere between 50 to 100. So what we have to also do now is we have to predict. We have to make some predictions in high need areas. And when I say high need areas, I'm talking about K-3 and I'm talking about science and math. We have to make predictions in reference to, okay, the trends are this, we're a little behind here, but if we get an influx of X number of students, we're gonna need an additional teacher. So that's the difficult part now, where can we make that prediction, hire an additional teacher early so we can make sure we have someone, and then adjust when the school year comes into play. So that's an additional layer that school districts, and in all my career, have never had to deal with. The fact that we have to ensure that we have teachers available when we need them. Not in October, we had more students in this grade level, now we gotta go find a teacher. So That's a new level of unpredictability that we are dealing with as a profession. And I want to emphasize, it is important to note that we do not staff based on what's in MyStar. We staff based on, and as one of my former, well, he still is a mentor of mine, Dr. Gsrp, who I worked under for many years, he always told me, until you see the white of their eyes, you know, they don't count. And that's what we do. We make sure those students are in class.
That's good to know.
Yes. So categoricals, real quick. So what are categoricals? They are Title 1, 2, 3, 4, 31A, 41A, Special Education, and Gsrp. I won't go into detail what each is, but what I can say is they all have specific needs. And the categoricals support students that are at risk due to multiple circumstances, such as economic need, social need, language need, academic need, health needs, emotional need. What I can tell you is that we currently are at about approximately 76% free and reduced lunch as a district. But that is not our only at-risk population. Crestwood schools previously only used that number. With our team this year, we have identified approximately 8 to 10% more students that are in need based on academic need. So these are students who may not receive free or reduced lunch, but they are considered at risk because their academic need illustrates that they are 2 or more years behind in their education. How do we do that? We look at our assessment data. We have moved from NWEA to iReady because iReady is directly aligned with the state Common Core, as well as directly aligned with MSTEP and SAT. Where does this money come to support us there? 31A funds.
Are you finding the need in academic because of the
Please
last year and a
address the
half of
chair,
COVID? Oh.
Please. Go ahead.
Are you finding that this is because of the last year and a half of COVID, the academic need, or is it outside factors?
It's hard to say. And the reason why it's hard to say is because we don't have data on our students for at least 2 years. And so usually what you do is you look at 3-year trends, year after year after year. We have, and I'll be presenting data to the board in the near future from last year's MSTEP scores. But for example, our MSTEP at Riverside Middle School, for example, out of all the students, I want to say 40 students, and I could be incorrect, but it was a very small number of students who took the MSTEP because it was optional last year. The year before, we didn't have any data because we didn't due to COVID. The year before that, it was before this administration. And a lot of those students that there's data on may not be with us. So it's really hard for us to say what it is. Now, if I was to make created a hypothesis, an educated guess, I would say that COVID has a lot to do with it. Because what we're hearing from teachers and from administrators is, you know, they're working with kids who are 2 years behind, not just academically, but also emotionally and socially. And there are things that they're working with these students that they don't expect at that grade level. You know, with an 8th grader, they don't expect some of the behaviors. And we're making adjustments as we go. So to answer that, an educated guess would be, I would say it plays a role into it. Until we have at least 2-3 years of data, and now that we're using iReady, it's really helping us identify specifically where our students' needs are.
Okay, my question is, we already started using iReady
Yes.
across the district?
Oh, yes.
This is the first year?
Yes.
Okay,
This is the first year, and we're implementing it 100%.
okay, thank you.
And I believe teachers received training on it in the last set of professional development. And that's the other thing too, is with our new balanced calendar, PD, the professional development for the teachers in these programs is built into it. So we're not asking them to come on Saturdays, we're not asking them to come after school. It's built into the calendar now to support them to grow with these programs.
So everybody has an equal opportunity?
Yes, Madam
Thank
Chair.
you. Okay.
So what does our staffing data say? So what our staffing data says. Currently, we have a healthy staffing ratio across the board, but are actually understaffed in K-3 due to our high ratios. Now, this is due to infrastructure needs and limited space to add these grade levels. Additionally, we are understaffed in high school in order to maintain a less than 30 class size. And again, it's based on infrastructure, and it's based on limited teachers available to teach high-need areas. So I'm going to just talk about these ratios real quick, and then I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lazar to talk about where we're at, and also I know she's going to emphasize a couple key points. One fact, I don't believe we've hired any new teachers. Like all of our teachers have been replacements, and Dr. Lazar can give you detail. But when you look at our elementary ratio specifically, right now at Highview, we're at 1 to 25.4, Hillcrest 1 to 25.4, Kinlock 1 to 28.6. Now, Kinlock, the reason why our ratio is so much higher is because we have a higher population that lives in the Kinlock area, and that's where we have that higher need for infrastructure updates. And that is why Kinlock's going to be receiving the majority of the new classrooms that we're building this summer, hopefully. So that's going to help with that ratio as well. So if you want to look at specific elementary grade level averages, these are the areas where we see we need to give additional support. Highview, kindergarten's at 28, second grade's at 27. Another thing that we do as a district is if we can create split classrooms, we'll create split classrooms. Problem is, we have nowhere to put those split classrooms. And therefore, you may have some classes that are below the ratio needed. Like, they might be at 22, 23, might even be at 20. But you have a couple classes that are at 28 or 27, because in order to make it work, you'd have to create a split classroom. But without infrastructure, you can't create that split classroom. At Kinlock, you can see across the board, the numbers are high. So when we have these additional classrooms built, and we're able to bring teachers in to fill these classrooms, we can reduce these numbers. And at that time, again, we look at where our numbers are at the time. Riverside Middle School, grade 5, we have a good ratio. We're at 1 to 25.1, so we're good at there with Riverside Middle School for 5th grade. Grades 6 through 8, we're at 28.8. Now, something I'd like to explain about, so we're in good shape at Riverside Middle School, except there's one area that we could probably use some support in, and that's in the social studies area, and there's another slide coming up. But one thing I'd like to make clear to the board and to the public, when we do these ratios, we take out the elective classes. Reason for that is because it throws the numbers way off, because some elective classes are higher than other elective classes, because it's based on what students' requests are for elective classes. Moreover, we take the elective classes out because the elective classes work through the schedule in order to balance what the students' needs and where they need to be during the day. So when you throw the elective teachers in there outside of the core, that ratio goes down, but it's not a true representation of what's happening in language arts, math, science, and social studies. Special education is also not part of the ratio because, as you'll see in later slides, we have a special education staff, but they're not classroom teachers. And if they are a classroom teacher, they're working with a very small group of students who have specific IEPs. So again, that would be another classroom teacher that would bring that ratio down and wouldn't be a true representation of what the core content area class ratios
Okay,
are.
that would be where my confusion is. Go ahead, Ms. Wallace.
Well, what is the average elective classes for 6 through 8? Is it like couple per semester? And then when you did the data, and I realize you took it out for this presentation, but was there also, did you guys do it with the electives first in like a comparison, or you just strictly did it without?
So with the electives, it goes below 21 student ratio.
Okay.
Okay, which isn't a true representation. If you walked into the math, science, language arts, and social studies classes, you'll see there are not 21 students in those classes.
Right. So I guess then my question would be, would you be able to, this is probably a crazy question, but I'm going to ask it.
Mm-hmm.
To make the numbers, to balance them, would you be able to move teachers out of the electives?
Yes, and that we did, and we did.
Okay,
There are some teachers who do teach multiple areas.
okay.
We have one teacher off the top of my head that I know, just from looking at the data, who teaches, I want to say 2 hours of math,
Okay,
and then 3 hours of an elective, because this teacher has that dual certification.
Okay.
So wherever a teacher can teach dual certified, we do make that move. That was one of the ways we got that ratio down to 28.8, because prior to doing this, the ratio was higher. It was at 32. But what we found was that there were some classes with only 8, 9 kids because the teacher wasn't teaching in dual areas.
okay.
Now that the teachers are teaching in dual areas, you won't find any classes less than 16, 17, except if it's a course we're trying to build. For example, like a beginner's band course. Okay, if we're trying to build that, there might be a section of 10 or 12. Why? Because we don't want to cut band. So we want to build the program. That's really only when you'll see that. And when I talk about the high school, it's the same thing. Because if the board remembers, in one of our very first conversations, the board was concerned about some classrooms in the high school having only 7, 8 kids. That is no longer the case. because everyone that is dual certified, if they can teach in 2 areas, they do, only if they have to, because, we don't want to say everybody's gonna teach 2, no. But the other piece too that we did in the high school, and I'm prefacing as that before I get to that slide, is teachers who teach advanced placement also teach regular non-AP courses. So you don't have one person teaching 5 hours of advanced placement with 2 hours at 7, 8 kids a class, where now if those 15 kids could be in a different hour together, and then that teacher might teach 2 hours in another area. So they could teach AP laying for 3 hours, and they could teach English 11 for 2 hours. So that adjustment has been made as well. So no longer do we have that. And again, if there is a small class size, and honestly, I want to say, I don't think there's anything less than 17, maybe 15, but that's a course that we're trying to build.
Okay, so then my question is, does anybody have any questions?
Yeah.
Can I just ask this real quick? So then my question is, there are no teachers that are teaching on their prep or anything like that anymore?
We do have some teachers teaching on their prep because we're trying to find people to fill those
fill those
positions.
positions.
So they're not teaching on their prep because our schedule is screwed up.
Okay,
If they're teaching on their prep, it's number one, they're filling in because we can't find a sub. Number two, we still have a vacancy and we can't find somebody. So instead of bringing in a sub, we would rather have the certified teacher teach during that time. And number three, if there's a couple areas here or there, and I think it's all been cleaned up thus far, and I know Dr. Lazar can go into more detail on that, but it is not like it was in the past where teachers.
It's not $300,000,
Exactly.
$400,000.
Exactly.
Okay.
Anyone that's teaching on their prep is because it's an urgent need.
Okay.
It's not because, and that's one of the reasons why we went from trimester to semester,
Right,
and it adjusted and it corrected that.
okay.
Dr. Lazar, do you want to add to that? My apologies.
The only thing I would add is the cost would be different because if they're doing it on an as-needed basis and it's not for a semester-long assignment, it's an hourly wage versus a fraction of their salary. So that also changes
The dynamics of the whole-
budgetary,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, Mr. Sabah?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know, that's enough to give me heartburn. I'm serious, I don't like the numbers, obviously, I don't think anybody does. When we talk about right sizing, and taking a look at the average average students per classroom, and we're so much higher. Yet we've got restrictions on the number of classrooms. We're caught up in a bond that really didn't add much in classroom sizes. We need to start talking about this because, as you know, when homes are selling in the community, they're not selling to husband and wife or single person. They're selling to people with 1, 2, or multiple children. This is going to become even scarier if we don't start looking at options and quickly.
Well, the good thing is we are looking at options. We're adding classrooms to the buildings.
I know. Those look like Band-Aids, though, in comparison to what's coming. If you talk to some of the realtors in the area, as I do all the time, there is such a high demand for the Crestwood School District from Dearborn, let's put it like it is, and other surrounding communities, that homes are being sold before they're put on the market with people that have children. So I'm not trying to alarm anybody, but I'm alarmed myself. And I'm a little nervous, honestly, just looking at these numbers. So, wish we would have did this at the end. I could have thought about it on the way home instead of thinking about the whole meeting. But anyway, that was my point.
I can honestly say kudos to the team because you would have been much more alarmed when you looked at this years ago. So we've come a long way in
But
all
the numbers
honesty.
were a lot lighter?
Huh?
Or the numbers were lighter or more?
Oh, no, they were heavier.
Well, I know they've done a fantastic job. There's no question. I just,
Thank you.
we're looking at,
They're balanced, it's much more balanced than it's.
we're looking at square footage restrictions now. I mean,
Yeah.
and I know we're adding on, but we gotta start looking at the high school.
Yeah. Yes,
You know, we've
100%.
talked about different options of moving forward, moving back onto the field, whatever it may be, but these numbers are only growing quicker, and I know that our youth population, especially in Riverside, seems to be ballooning in
Yes.
comparison to years past, and those kids are gonna go right on to high school.
Yes.
So those numbers, close to 1,400, are only gonna go up.
Just to add to that, Trustee Sabo, We have over 1,400 at the middle school, we have over 1,400 at the high school.
That's my point.
So
Yeah.
you know where that's gonna go as time moves on. So the good thing though, and I wanna reiterate to the community when they see this, is our phase one of this process is we're using ESSER funding. We're utilizing that money correctly to support this growth. But there will be a time where we're gonna have to come to the community and say, okay, we've exhausted all of our funds, but we need some additional support. And as more families move in, God willing, and they keep coming in, hey,
Yes.
we have to make those adjustments. So we're in agreement, and this is why this presentation is like an opportune time right now with all the conversations we're having to illustrate to people where we are in terms of staffing and staffing ratios. And if I may add real quick, my apologies. So the board is aware I sent out a survey to the staff and I sent out a survey to the community. An underlying theme that was coming across those surveys when it came to lower elementary was please lower class sizes. That was an underlying theme. So I just wanted to.
Well, yeah, with lowering class sizes, you would hope that if we decide to go for a bond, that they would understand that's the only way that you can do it to some extreme.
Sure.
But, okay, Ms. Fawaz?
I have a couple things. I missed the portion, I don't know if you said it or not, but did you use the numbers for like special education classes with these numbers? No.
No.
Okay, and then the other part, just to add to that, or to just made me think of this, I know you said in our last meeting that it was, 80 million plus or something like that to, possibly build a new high school or,
Yes.
redo it. So in all the, was there a cost analysis of the Band-Aids being proposed versus actually starting over and building a new one?
So we just started that process. That was last board meeting. I was asking permission from the board to move forward with an RFB process. We've just started that process. There will be a comparison within that process.
Okay.
We want to bring to the community exactly, these are our options, these are the costs.
Well, with the funding, plus the other committee that you were proposing,
Yes,
I'm thinking we might as well, try to do this right the first time.
put everything on the table. I agree. I agree.
Two things. I wanted to maybe clarify something that Mr. Sabah said about the previous bond. We never intended with the previous bond to add classrooms. That was not the intent. It
But we
was,
did at the high school.
well, we did by restructuring,
Right.
but we did not add. It was strictly urgent needs, which is heating, pipes, that type of thing. So I just wanted to clarify that. And then the second thing I had on this, not that some of our Band-Aids are sufficient, we have talked about Berwyn. Have we had any update on Berwyn?
We have our next meeting with the architects, I believe, next week. Friday, this Friday, for another update. Because they had just finished with the survey and they had just finished with, I think, they had to do that testing.
The Berwyn was with they went in and tested the electrical and different things like that.
Yes.
And were able to get up on the roof, and so they didn't, before then, they weren't able to get up on the roof and see all that stuff. So they finalized all of that, so now they're gonna go through the process and.
Okay. And then do we have buy-in from the city yet, or is that still to come?
City, it's still to come. It's going to be based on the numbers. What it's going to come down to is when we get those final numbers, we're going to bring those numbers to the board to discuss if it is something that we want to move forward with, or if it is something that we want to reinvest our money elsewhere. If it is something that the board wants to reinvest in and go forward with, then we will schedule a meeting with the city to have that conversation. And if they are on board, then we'll start with some town hall meetings.
Okay, thank you,
And the city has been very cooperative. I would like everyone to know that.
thank you.
Ms. Janu, do you have any questions?
Nope, I'm good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay.
So then, I talked about high school briefly. So high school, there's another piece to high school that I would like to add, because it's the same thing as the middle school in terms of electives and special education, but also, we also subtract dual enrollment students. So we take the number of dual enrollment sections, we divide it by an average of 3 sections, because on average, students might take 2 to 3 sections of dual enrollment, and then we divide that by the number of core classroom teachers. Because we don't want to count, because if you count in the dual enrollment students and all this, your ratio goes up to like 38, which that is not the case. The ratio is closer to 34. Now, there's no exact number for dual enrollment because it fluctuates, but we are averaging in our core areas anywhere between, 29 and 34 students on average. And this 34 number doesn't take into consideration the fluctuation, where sometimes you have more students in dual enrollment and sometimes you have less students in dual enrollment. When you have less students in dual enrollment, you have more students in the classroom. Now, with our semester process, this is something that the board and we all discussed when I first came in. With the semester process, with the balancing of AP classes and dual enrollment classes, it's going to take us a couple years to find that trend, because we've moved away from the trimesters, we've moved away from classes with 7 or 8 kids. But what I can tell you is that when it comes to secondary needs, this is what we found would be our possible future needs in secondary. Possible future needs in secondary would be at least one additional math teacher to lower our class sizes in algebra and geometry, the two most important courses for our students to be successful. Also, one language arts teacher, because right now our language arts classes have the highest average. Our language arts classes are the ones that push that ratio up to 34. And the thing you have to understand about language arts, according to the Michigan Merit Curriculum, every student must have 4 years of language arts. So that is always your largest department. And then for Riverside Middle School, as you can see, grade 7 and 8 is where we struggle with class sizes. Okay, grade 5 you saw as well, grade 6 is okay, but in grade 7 and 8, one additional social studies teacher and one additional science teacher would help reduce those averages. That's as of now. Now, come the spring and come the fall, could that be the case? No, that may not be the case, because, different things happen. This is always fluid. So this is how we predict, and this is how we look at where are we now, what do we need in the future. And all of these numbers work directly into and fit within our budget. So I'm going to stop there for a second, and I don't know if Mrs. O'Hara wants to add anything in reference to special education, or if you have any questions in reference to special education, or if I covered it enough.
I don't have anything to add. You covered it pretty well.
I guess the question for special education would be, what are the numbers and what are the ratios? What are the limits? I know you can only have so many per class, correct?
It depends on the disability area with which you're serving.
Okay.
Caseloads depend on the disability area of the teacher.
Okay.
So resource at the elementary is 15 on their caseload. At the high school, it can go up to 23 on waivers. Post pandemic, our numbers are lower than they typically have been, but we have kind of some makeup to do, because in terms of the virtual and knowing that our students struggled during the virtual format, we went to the resource model for at a larger scale and are pulling students one-on-one to really get a gauge of the skill deficits that they're facing post-pandemic and trying to address those needs. So I would say our average caseload for the district is right around 12, which is lower than it has been. Because there's been years where we've been on waivers and have caseloads up to 23. But we wanted to, post-pandemic, really allow the teachers to really spend some time working with students to address the deficits.
So basically, we're pretty staffed, sufficiently staffed in
Yes.
special.
Special ed, we're in great shape.
That's good,
Yes.
okay.
No, we are. And we're in great shape because I have to give a lot of credit to Dr. Lazar and to Andrew O'Hara, who one day will probably be Dr. O'Hara, but anyway. The reason why I have to give them both a lot of credit is because they did, as you mentioned, Madam Chair. They looked at where our staff was, identified where our needs were, and had good conversations with
Right.
people to move people around where they needed to be. And then I got to give credit to Ms. Morgan, so the whole team, because then Ms. Morgan looked at our budgets and identified within our budgets, okay, what can we do? And you'll see something that I'm going to present on categoricals in a second. What can we do to make sure that our kids have everything they need? So the team does a really good job of like making those identifications and making those moves and creating that positive atmosphere with the union and the teachers to understand, look, we're going to do what's best for kids, but what's fair for teachers at the same time.
Ms. Kaminsky?
I wanted to bring this up. It may or may not be the right time, but I know our numbers have decreased by over 100 since the beginning of the year.
Mhm.
Do we have exit interviews where we know basically why we've been reduced by that many students? And I know it's a fluid number.
Yeah, no, we don't, but I can just give you something off the top of my head for you,
Okay.
that some data that I did put together.
Thank you.
So the mistake that I made and I will be honest with the board, is I gave you the numbers that were in MyStar, instead of giving you the numbers that were actually face-to-face.
Okay.
And what we identified, and I will tell you, I did break it down, because Andrea Wood gives me a monthly update on, and now weekly, because it's much less, on who leaves, and we can see where they go. Now, sometimes we see exactly what district, but there's codes. And
Okay.
those codes are very important, because that's how we track where students go, so on and so forth. What I can tell you is the majority of our districts is district-to-district move, okay? I can tell you this, it's everywhere in Wayne County and Oakland County. Of the students that left, 2% went district to district. Only not even less than 1%, so it's 0.25% went to local districts. So all the other districts were districts further out. Charter schools, it was less than 1%. It was 0.74%, less than 1% of students that left. That's a very small number, and that's normal. And a lot of times what happens when students go to charter schools, a lot of times they end up coming back.
Yeah.
But it was less than 1%. Private schools, 1% exactly, and all over, different private schools all over. And a lot of the private schools were, there was a lot of early elementary that went to private schools.
I'm actually relieved that it was an error about giving the numbers from MyStar
Yeah.
as opposed to butts and seats.
Yeah, that was, yeah.
For a few reasons. A, you're human and you made a mistake, and you never make mistakes.
No, I make them,
And
thank
B,
you.
we're not having students leave.
Yeah.
For the most part, so.
No.
That's all a good thing. So
Yeah,
thank you.
and that was an error on my part, and I remember telling the team, man, I made a mistake there, because now it looks worse than it is.
I feel much better.
A key thing too, Madam President, there's two more, that's it. A key thing too is, a little less than 1% are out of country. So I can tell you, that's 34 students. Those students are still out of country. They were out of country last year. Now, according to COVID guidelines last year, we could still educate them through the virtual. But this year, we cannot. Therefore, these families are stuck overseas. They can't get back.
Okay.
So if these families come back, well, then, and then they, and, you know, so, and they could be back in our district. And then we had less than, it was 0.07%, which is only 3 students, who went to the Henry Ford Early College. That's a Wayne County program that's sponsored by Dearborn, and anyone within Wayne County can apply to that program. So based on these numbers, that's where everyone went. And I do like to look at that, because, you know, if we see a trend,
Right.
then, okay, we gotta figure out something we're doing. But what I see is basically what most districts see anyhow.
Okay.
So, anybody have any questions?
I was just gonna ask a question about the mask mandate, obviously. I've heard from quite a few parents that I know, especially prior to the school year, that they didn't wanna bring their kids back because of the mask mandate.
But they're virtual, aren't they?
Not all of them.
Some are,
Some of them, yeah. I had a couple that told me they were going to private school because of that.
yeah.
So it's something to keep in mind also, I think, as this COVID thing alleviates a little bit. Hopefully we'll see the numbers come back up.
That's a very good point.
Okay, so, my question is, the 34 students we are no longer counting? Is that, we already?
We cannot.
Okay, so we already deducted those
Yes.
34. Okay, so then, who are the face-to-face students? It's the ones that come in daily, right? And then,
So our virtual students, the ones that we have in the virtual program,
those are considered
they're ours.
face-to-face? Okay,
Because Andrea Wood is phenomenal at what she does.
uh-huh,
So what she did, she worked with the county to identify what is the best way to code these students. So if I was to pull a MyStar report like I do with all this, it says V next to every one of those students and then we get credit for
but
them.
we get credit for that?
Yes, because as long as there is daily interaction between those students and the teacher, we're exceeding, according to Andrea, we're exceeding the requirements set forth by the county in order to get credit for those students, so we're in good shape.
So we have face-to-face, virtual, our dual enrollment kids are part of?
Yes,
Okay, and then we don't count, Divine Child's not in these numbers.
Divine Child is not in those numbers, so when you look at our current number, I think it's 3,950, right
Right.
around there, that doesn't include GSRP, it doesn't include
Okay.
preschool, and it does not include Divine Child.
Okay.
So once we add those numbers in, now you're looking at over 4,000 again, and closer to where we were originally, but maybe even higher than that. Because that's also, remember too, I believe we added another DC teacher because they wanted another course, so that's also gonna help us.
Okay, good. All right.
Yeah, so the numbers that you are seeing now are actually students in seats, and there are students. Okay, so I'd like to go over categoricals really quick. Oh, it's not showing it, so let me see if I can, if I gotta do something here. Cast.
I don't know about you, but I'm freezing.
There
Do
we
we have
go.
heaters in this building?
It's because the windows were open, our apologies. We were airing out the building. There we go. Okay, so it's gonna be easier for you to see on the paper that you have. So these are our so first off, I wanna just show you how the ratios work. One of the things that you'll see here is, I would like everyone to understand how these categoricals are so important to our success. And then I'm gonna turn it over to Dr. Lazar. So first off, you see here WIDA numbers, WIDA 1 to 3.5 and WIDA 3.6 to 5. What this represents, the 3.6 to 5 are, you know, and I'm not doing it backwards, right? Those are non-English speaking, correct? 5 is non-English?
No.
Other way around. 5 is high. Okay, I always get confused because it changed from a long time ago. So anyway, WIDA 1 through 3.5, these are the students that need intensive English language support. These are students who they are learning English for the first time. WIDA level 3.6 to 5 are students who still need English language support, but not as intensive. So what you'll see is that in this ratio here, you see here at Highview, you got a 25.4 ratio because there's 17 classroom teachers. That doesn't include the 2 teachers that are ESL teachers that support those students. They push into the classroom. They pull out and help those students. And then if you look to the right, and I won't go through every line item, this is just for you to understand how it looks. What you'll see is we have 3 staff members that support the WIDA 1 to 3.5 students. Of these 3 staff members, 1 is paid completely out of general fund, 2 are paid out of 31A. Why can we do that? Because if they're English need, they're considered at risk. Now, so in 31A is at-risk funding. And here's where the difference is now compared to where we were 2-3 years ago. Now, Zainab Jawad has done a phenomenal job of identifying the additional students who are considered at risk beyond the free and reduced lunch, which is gonna help us with our 31A allocations, because we submit that data to the state, they adjust our payment. So basically what this shows you here is that if you were to break down our categorical staff to students that need support, it's a 1 to 96 ratio. Now I know that sounds crazy, and it does sound crazy, but the reason why we separate the two is because not all 96 students get that intensive support on a daily basis. It's spread out over time, it's pushing into a classroom for an hour here, pushing in an hour there, pulling students out that need that additional support. Without our categoricals, we could not give these students the supports that they're getting. And what I can tell you is, and Dr. Lazar will talk about, I keep mentioning her name, is that the vast majority of, if not 100% of, and I could be wrong, it might be 96%, of those that the board approved for hire since August were replacements of classroom teachers and or additions that we made to our categorical funding to support our students' social emotional learning, special education, as well as these categorical funds. So EL support, literacy support, mathematics support. So if you go through, it just shows it for each, we broke it down for each specific school, what their numbers are so that you can see their numbers, so that you can see how we have support staff supporting those students. And we also separated young 5. So like if you look at Kinlock, we didn't add the young 5s into the entire ratio because with young 5s, we have a 1 to 15 ratio. Why do we have a 1 to 15 ratio? Because we're trying to build the program. Okay, now we would love to have a ratio of maybe 1 to 22, but we're building the programs and we're getting parents to trust us with young 5s. When I came in, and then we have a young 5s at Hillcrest at a 1 to 11 ratio. When I came into this district, one of my goals, and also due to the guidance of the board, was to establish a young 5s program. We had 0 before I came in, 1 after I came in, and within 2 years now we're up to 2. Our goal is to have at least 3, maybe even 4 in the future, Young Fives programs. Because that's that whole GSRP, preschool, that preschool through 14 mentality that we've been discussing for a long time. And then if you go down to Riverside Middle School, you see I separated the 5th grade aggregate because it throws off the ratio. And then you see in the high school. And here's the thing, if you look, and this is another element to illustrate that we are meeting, I'm gonna say this twofold. And I know I'm going long and I apologize, but I'm gonna say this twofold. Number one, we're meeting what the DOJ was expecting over 8 years ago. Secondly, we're doing what's best for kids. If you look at the number of students in need at each school, you will see that we have made it equitable. Okay? You no longer have more support staff in a school that has less need. And this is where I'm talking about with the team and looking at budgets and looking and having conversations, what's good for kids and what's fair for the teachers. So by us being able to do this, the Department of Justice mandates are being met. And they're not just being met because we have certain teachers that can speak certain languages. We all know research says that that's not the best solution. The best solution is the instruction we give the children, the supports we give the children. And as you can see in these ratios, like if you look at the high school, let's remember, prior to me becoming superintendent, and I apologize for saying this, but I want to make it clear, our high school had 0 title funds. Our high school had 0 support. All our high school had was a principal, 2 assistant principals, an AD, 1 social worker, and a school psychologist, between the middle school and the high school. Now, because we have been able to adjust our budgets and we have been able to spend our money adequately and correctly, we are making more of an equitable educational system for our students. And that's why now in the high school there are much more supports.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Salem.
why are you apologizing for that? Thank you. I mean, you're saying it as if,
Because I don't want it to be as if I'm touting
no,
myself.
but the progress is pointing things out that we've gotten better at and things we need to do. Thank you for that.
You're
I'm
welcome.
sorry, I just had to say that.
No, thank
Yeah.
you.
Um,
Yes, Madam Chair.
my question is, so now all those teachers are pushing in and their time is accounted for with the support.
Yes.
That's awesome.
They're
That's
keeping
good to
logs
hear.
now. They're part of the school improvement process. They're part of the professional learning community.
Okay.
They're evaluating data. We're getting there. And I tell everyone, it's a month and a half of, it's been a month and a half we've been back at this. And we can already see, we can already see the train moving. We can already see things happening. And I know a lot of teachers feel overwhelmed right now. I know that. And I want the teachers to know that I hear you and I feel you. But we're in a situation as a school district where we have to push forward because this is our opportunity right now. If we want to be the best district in Wayne County in the next 2 to 3 years, this is our opportunity right now. And that's why we're pushing as hard as we're pushing. Because I don't think there's anyone on this table that's not pushing just as hard. But our teachers are the ones in the front lines. And I'm going to tell you, over 90% of them, they're doing what needs to be done.
It's good to hear.
So the next tab, real quick, is a special education. What you can see here is it's broken down the needs at each building, not specific needs, because that would be like a 10-page Excel sheet, but just the number of students that have IEPs and that need support, and the support staff that are available for them. And again, you'll see an equitable distribution, okay?
So, you know what, if I can go back to one question.
Yes.
Where you're showing Newita. So if the difference in Newita, the one through 3.5 and the, 3.6 to 5, do you still get equal funding between the two groups?
Yes, see, you don't get additional funding for kids that need the intensive support.
Okay.
You only get funding for the number of EL kids you have.
Okay.
So then, that's why we have to be very
Diligent.
strategic on how we place people and how we fund them in order to
Okay.
give the highest level of support possible.
Okay.
The service hours are also different.
The what
So
is-
the required service hours for the
Right.
1 to 3.5 are higher than the 3.6.
Right.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Salem.
Dr. Masalam, some of these special education numbers, are those, do they include the number of children that are utilizing other services with other districts?
Yes, Yes, so many of these children that are special education will fall under the at-risk category, so they can get additional support through 31A, they can get additional support through Title I. And when I show you our expenditures, you're gonna be shocked at how underfunded we are in special education and how we as a district have to make up that. Now, that's the next tab.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. So let's go to the next tab, Categorical Expenditures. So for example, a lot of this has not been finalized because we're still waiting on final allocations for this coming year. So we used our allocations from last year, but we do know our allocations are not going down, and we do know that our allocations are going up. So, for example, Title I, we receive $1.8+ million. We spend $1.75 million on staffing, the human resources piece, which leaves us with $180,000. That goes to supplemental materials and supplies, so on and so forth. Title II, there is a negative balance of $98,000, but we're expecting a carryover of $112,000, right around there. So, and this is because we're basing it off of 2-year previous salaries, and we have some salaries on Title II that won't be on Title II next year. So that's gonna balance itself out. Title II, by the way, is professional development. It's teachers who do professional learning that support students and staff. Title I is at risk across the board. Title III is for your English language learners. You can see we're at 18,000 over, but we're expecting over $20,000 in carryover, which is gonna cover that. And then we're gonna make some moves next year just to move some of the funds off of that budget into other budgets. And that's a normal procedure. As long as you're moving funds between categoricals that are allowed expenditures, that's okay. Title III, well, I have to give Mrs. Jawad a lot of credit on this. This is something new to us. We've never had Title III immigrant funds. So we're gonna be receiving that. Now, I know it's only close to $7,000, but that's $7,000 we can use towards materials and supplies and assessments. Also, we can use that towards tutoring for English language learners as well, like after-school programming. Title IV is another fund. We use $100,000 in staffing, and then $38,280 we have left over for supplemental materials. Title IV supports like technology. It also supports any other innovative ideas or programming to support our students. So we can use Title IV for like restorative practices as well. 31A, that's one of our big ones. That's a state, and that's the one that we're hoping we're gonna get even more of an increase because we've identified more at-risk students. 31A is just like Title I, but you have more flexibility. So with that more flexibility, you can move some different funds around to support your at-risk population. Section 41A is we have a large remaining amount in Section 41A. We received a lot of carryover this year that we weren't expecting, and we're gonna be moving some funding around. Section 41A, again, Mrs. Morgan, that represents, am I forgetting? ELL, so that's additional ELL supports. That's what I thought. Thank you. First, robotics, you see 22,000. We haven't spent any this year, but this is what we're using to help our robotics team with their supplies and so on and so forth. Now, here's the big one. So as I mentioned earlier, you will see special education. We only receive $1.9 million in special education. Our expenditure is $4.3 million. So we're in the red, $2.4 million. Where does that $2.4 million come from? It comes from the other categoricals and as well as general fund. Why? Because this is not just the Crestwood schools. It's every school district in the state of Michigan and the United States. No one gets funded as much as they need in order to reach the needs of all students with IEPs or needs supports. So all school districts have to use other funds to truly help the special education students. And this is something we're committed to, and it's clean, it's in our budget, it's not something we have to worry about. And then you have additional, you have the IDEA, special education flow-through. Again, another special education, you have the preschool program, which we have $3,227 left over, Gsrp, $39,122 left over. And with that $39,122, that's what we're gonna use for supplies, furniture, materials, so on and so forth, now that we, have our allocations. And then 31O is something new. It's coming out this year. We still don't know. We will be applying for it. The deadline's not for another month, I believe. But what 31O is, it's a state expenditure to support with COVID learning. So we can use, when we get that funding and we identify what that funding is, we can use that funding for social work counselors, materials, teachers, so on and so forth. That's helping to get kids caught up with COVID. So, told you it was a long one. So I want to ask Dr. Lazar if she has anything she wants to add in reference to, you know, who we've hired, and I know I've touched upon a couple things.
I think you already explained it. But yeah, just to review, I know that there was a question about the new hires. The majority of the new hires, actually almost all of them, were due to resignations or retirements, and the reasons behind all of those have been shared. A lot of it was relocation, some of it was leaving the profession, so those pieces that we had to cover at the beginning of the year. The only like new hires that would have been brand new positions would have been anybody who was hired due to needing virtual teachers to cover the virtual program, or if teachers were pulled out of their classrooms to cover the virtual program and we had to hire somebody in order to take their place for this year. But as you can see with the numbers, even if there's no longer a need for the virtual program in the future, we can easily absorb the teachers who are in the virtual program now to assist us in some of those class size reductions that are necessary. The other two positions would have been the fourth grade cap at Hillcrest and the media specialist position at the elementary, and that was due to the increase in prep time in the teacher's contract. So with an increase in prep time, you need additional teachers to teach classes to provide that prep time. And so that's where those two positions at the elementary came from that were new. And then there was the addition of a fifth grade at Riverside, but then again, that was a numbers issue. Once we had those bodies in those seats, as you can see, that ratio right now is around 25. Otherwise, it would have been extremely high for fifth graders coming in that had been out of school for 2 years that had those high needs coming into the middle school. So that was the one position there. Anything else would have been a realignment, a teacher leaving a classroom to go to a resource position type deal, but they were not new positions.
And if I may add real quick, Madam Chair, I apologize. We also, with that balancing of prep time, that was so that we had equitable prep time across the board, because as you remember in the previous contract, elementary teachers were receiving an enormous less number of hours of prep time compared to secondary.
55 minutes less a week.
Yes.
So, looking at this entire package and understanding our size constraints, is there a ask that administration's coming to the board for yet at this time, or is this just to be prepared that we're treading lightly and these needs are coming soon, but you just are making us aware?
Making the board aware and the community aware. First, the community aware so that those that see with us with large class sizes, that we're aware of it and we're in the process of adjusting it, and bringing the board up to speed on how this whole process works.
Yep.
So that if in the future we do say, well, we need these positions, here is why, the board understands the process. Because if my understanding and my communications with Madam Chair, a presentation like this has not been done for the board.
Ever.
So we felt that it was pertinent that we
Yep.
bring this to the board so the board understands.
Thank you. It's appreciated.
Yes, very much so. So I guess, anybody else have any questions? So then my question is like, we're about where we need to be except for that special education you're taking from areas to kind of
Financially,
balance it?
yeah, financially, we're fine.
Okay,
We're actually better than fine, and that's gonna
Okay.
come in a report in about a month. I know I'm throwing her on the spot, because we're finishing, because our audit is finishing up right now.
okay.
So I,
The auditors will present to
Yes.
you on November 8th.
so you'll see we're even better
Okay.
than we were in our last audit.
Okay, so then, because I know you and I had that discussion about that, so then any additional positions that were, that will come to us that are not teacher, core teacher, or whatever, the funding is coming from
Categoricals.
categoricals, and do we have the funds for that?
Yes.
Because,
In those numbers are the TBD positions as
oh,
well.
they are in there?
Yes, no.
Okay.
I just so the board is aware, and I remember when I first started, trustee Vice President Kaminsky said, I saw your car at the office on a Saturday and a Sunday, and I saw your car at the office during Christmas. That was when, before I had the team, I was trying to make sense of our budgets. And that was when we started identifying. So I would like the board to be aware that we don't ever bring a position to you that we cannot forecast for at least 3 years.
Okay.
And the reason why we say 3 years is because you have turnover, you have retention, you have different things. So we're not gonna bring any position to the board that has not been forecasted for at least 3 years.
That's, yeah.
Yeah.
Because
It's
that's
never a
always-
year,
That's,
it's,
I'll be honest, that's always been my biggest
Yeah.
fear, is that if you bring them on and then we can't, keep them there
yeah.
we can't retain them there for the 3 years, it's not a fair situation to put anybody in.
It'll never
But
be a
that's-
year-to-year situation unless I come to the
Okay.
board and say, I'd like to contract this person for 1 year.
Okay,
But if it's a full-time hire, then it is, we need this person for the next multiple years, and we forecasted we're okay, as long as there isn't a major downturn in our funding. That is something that none of us can predict. Even
Right.
though we know funding has its ebbs and its flows, and we also know there's its dips, but we're also being prepared with our dips with our use of our fund balance.
okay. Which we hope we don't have to,
Yeah, our goal,
right?
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, like I
We're on the
said,
same
when the
page.
auditors come to report to you, you'll like that presentation
Okay.
as well.
okay, thank you so much.
Thank
Good
you.
information.
I will turn it over to Penny now, for the next item in the study session. I'll stop casting so you can cast.
Oh, David's gonna pull it up for me. Yeah, I can't cast. I'm not special like you. So, I wanna talk, excuse me, sorry. I wanna talk to the board about all of the COVID funding that we've received over the past 2 years and the potential funds that we will be receiving over the next 2 years. Is this gonna work, David? Probably.
Look at the top, see if it's pushed to green.
No, she can still see us.
There you go.
Najar can still see us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So our funding sources that we have for the categorical for COVID is COVID-19, GEAR, which is the government allotted funding, CRF, which is Corona Relief Fund, ESSER Equity, ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3. Of the COVID-19 funds, we received $50,929.22, which we fully expended in the 1920 school year for masks and cleaning supplies. The GEAR funds were fully expended in 2021, and that was for $370,550 of Chromebooks. The Corona Relief Fund, or the CRF Fund, we received $1,446,865. Of those funds, $145,300 are still remaining to spend, and that's going to cover the, there's some supplies for the buildings that need to be purchased, some different furniture that's being purchased for the buildings. So with that money that we spent in 2021 is summer school supplies, the printing of the homework packets at the beginning of this COVID, thinking map supplies, Chromebooks, time clocks, air purifiers, PPE supplies, which include the face mask, gowns, gloves, other cleaning supplies, our hazard pay, and additional furniture. Our ESSER equity funds were $197,785, which we fully expended in the 2021 school year, and that was to provide internet connections for the students who couldn't have internet, Chromebooks, and an additional counselor at the secondary level. ESSER 1 funds, we received $1,318,568. Of that, we have $140,265 remaining. That remaining money will be used to pay for the social worker and the added support, attendance support for this year. In addition, we purchased iReady software. We had the attendance support, the social worker, and then the rest of the Chromebooks. Now remember, we did purchase 4,000 Chromebooks, so we are now 1-to-1.
So if I can ask a question,
Yes,
you're saying that the attendance support will be paid out of ESSER 1 funds? So then what happens when that's all exhausted?
ESSER 1, once those are all exhausted, and I'll get to that soon.
Okay,
Yep,
yes, Mr. Sabo.
Can I ask you a question, please?
of course,
So I see Chromebooks in 4 different areas.
yes,
So we've got GEAR, CRF, ESSER Equity, and ESSER 1.
correct. We purchased, it was approximately $1.3 million worth of Chromebooks.
4,000
Mm-hmm.
Chromebooks.
Yes,
Thank you.
you're welcome. ESSER2 funds, we have only spent a minimal amount. We received $6,873,868. This is what we're using to pay the architects and then our additions to our elementary buildings. So at this point, that's the reason why we've only spent a minimal amount. We've not started the actual construction of the elementary additions. Sr3 funds are to come. We will be receiving $15,448,709 for Sr3 funds. These funds, the application for these funds are December 15th. It's due December 15th. There's several requirements regarding these funds. We have to have community and stakeholder input. We have to set 20% aside for specific programmings which enhance loss of learning during COVID. And then we have to utilize evidence-based programming. We will be obtaining additional information on Berwyn prior to submitting the plan. And also principals are preparing meetings with their parents from the school improvement teams to discuss potential use of the Sr3 fundings so that we do have the community input and the support from the parents. That's why we don't have a clear picture of how all these funds are going to be spent for the $15 million as of yet.
So, if I can ask, would summer school be part of that Sr3?
Summer school could be part of Sr3, yes.
Okay.
It also is allowable in Title I, 31A, so multiple different places.
Even after school.
Yes. The outcomes that we've been able to reach with the utilization of these funds have been implement district-wide research-based assessments such as iReady, the one-to-one district with the Chromebooks, so all students were one-to-one, provide additional social and emotional support for the community and for the students within the community, and provide additional staff support.
Yes, Ms. Blas.
There's no expiration on any of the funding, right?
There is expirations on the funding. So Sr3 ends 2023, Sr2 ends September 2022, and Sr1 ends September 21. However, there is a carryover period which pushes it out. So although they end, there's usually a one-year carryover period, so that really pushes everything out an extra year.
Can you carry over, is there a minimum amount you can carry over until expiration?
They've not set a minimum amount or a maximum amount as of yet.
Okay.
They've been very lenient with Sr1, especially because of the fact that it was pushed onto us so late without a lot of time to plan for it.
If I may add to that real quick, and from what I'm hearing, once you have projects in place and they're going forward, that money's already allocated, therefore you use it until the project is done.
So when we get audited, do they have auditors auditing these funds and how they were utilized?
Our auditors have to do a separate single audit, and as you'll see in our audit on November 8th, they do audit specific programs. They did audit CRF this year, so Corona Relief Fund, but because of the federal guidelines, they do have to audit these programs.
Okay.
And that's part of our regular yearly audit, and it's the single audit in the back.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When you talk about Sr2 and some of the funding we've set aside for the architect work,
Yes.
for the additions, and you say as long as it's earmarked already, what does that mean? I mean, is there something that has to be in play? Do we have to break ground?
We had to submit a budget and have a budget approved, and we've already had the budget approved for the I apologize, for the Sr2 funding.
So the budgetary requirements are met.
Yes.
How long do we have to start before we break ground so that funding is not in jeopardy?
So funding for Sr2 technically it ends September 2022, but they'll push it out to September 2023.
And how far are we looking before we break ground?
We should be breaking ground within the next 3 to 6 months. So we
3 to
should be
6.
well ahead of that.
And how long are those projects going to take?
We're going to discuss that this week as well with the architects.
Okay, so.
We don't have a finalized date just because of the timing and the bid process. So
We could be coming up on issues then. I'm just imagining.
No, as long as it's been approved and we've started the process, we're okay.
Yep.
So so when we get our final, this is how much it's gonna be, so on and so forth, we start bidding out the jobs, and the jobs are approved, and the board approves the job has started. Therefore, so if we're not finished, it's okay, because we're continuing with the job. We can't come back in September, we can't come back in October of 2023 and say, okay, we're starting it now. No, we have to start it prior to the deadline date.
And the funds are allocated for that
Yes.
project, and you can.
As long as we're holding the funds now, that's the key. We're
Yeah,
not
the funds
waiting to
are,
get the funds.
they're available for us, some of them that we've already spent, because there are things too that we spent that we're getting the funding later, but we've already spent it. So it covers.
With the federal programs, we actually have to spend the money first
Yes.
and then request for reimbursement. That's
So like
how-
a change request possible, I don't know how you would verbalize it, but, so the funding, I just wanna make sure the funding is there, the funding is available. It's not
Yes.
sitting with us, it's still sitting with the federal government.
Correct.
We're gonna request it as we go along. We have until September 2022, but they'll give us 1 year until September 2023 if the project has already started, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I just had a quick question.
And Madam Chair, I don't mean to interrupt. Trustee Najun, I think, clicked in as well. I didn't know if you saw her this
No,
way.
I didn't. Just real quick. So going back to the attendance support, it's allocated in ESER one. And what happens after ESER one?
After ESER 1, we have it going to be allocated out of 31A.
Okay.
So we'll be set for that, because there are some things in 31A that are one-time only things that will be coming out, and then that can go back in. I'm sorry, I thought I put that in there. I
no.
apologize.
Ms. Janoon?
Yeah, so were we dipping, I don't know if it's just, maybe I just don't remember correctly. Did we need ESER 3 as well for the additions? We were,
It's borderline, so it just is going to depend on final bids. Right
Okay,
now,
so-
it's
okay.
really close. It's about $100,000 difference.
okay. I wasn't sure if I recalled that being a potential need to dip into ESER 3 for that, so, okay.
Okay.
And if I may, Madam Chair, I'm sorry, just for all transparency, we did discuss that. We also discussed, in a worst-case scenario, that we may have to dip into the fund balance to finish some of the project, but it wasn't gonna be a major dip in the fund balance, and that was the purpose behind fund balance. So if we're looking at $200,000 out of fund balance to get a $7 million job done, I think, the numbers illustrate the need and the necessity.
Ms. Velez?
If we decided to build new, instead of just the add-ons that we've been discussing, will we still be within time for these SR2 or some of these fundings?
You cannot use ESSER fundings to build a brand-new building. You have to use it to renovate space that you already have, because it's meant to modify for COVID and for the coronavirus.
Okay. I'm nowhere near enough, but hey, every little bit helps.
I wish it would.
Okay.
Are there any other questions?
Thank
I
you.
would just like to thank the board for the support with the ESSER funds and allowing the district and the administration to move forward with these projects, because it's going to be a huge help to our community throughout the fall. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Najat, did you have any other questions? No? Okay.
So, Madam Chair, the third item in the study session is a quick item. Dr. Lazar would like to discuss real quick our two possible options for firms to bring in for our policy review. It was I forget which Friday update.
I think it was the
Yeah,
last
it
one.
was the most recent memo, and in that memo, you did have a breakdown of each of the categories that were provided either through Troon, which we are a retainer district through their law firm, or going through Neola, which is not a law firm, but their policies are all vetted through lawyers and, reviewed by their legal teams internally and externally, and the cost breakdown of both. I think the major difference between the two was the amount of
Work involved?
the amount of personal in-person support that would be provided. So those costs are already calculated in the Neola model, versus, Troon would be willing to send somebody out. However, it would be at our billable hours in order to have somebody come in and actually go through those policies in person with the teams. The other thing is that Neola did also say that if the board would like to schedule a presentation to have them come in and go through some of their, to break down their model a little bit more, they'd be willing to do that as well for you.
I guess my only question is to make sure that the board is involved and to understand what those policies are, so nothing is missed. How long are we looking at, like, time-wise?
So with the Troon proposal, they said on average it takes roughly 3 months to get the policies in place. With Neola, the process takes at least a year.
Wow. Okay.
But with both, again, they are willing to go through and answer any questions and, you know, meet with the board about explaining those policies. The policies for both are pretty vetted. They're either, the policies are split into different categories. They're either legal requirements or vetted best practice, with some additional options, like a third category of more preferential type options.
Dr. Lazar, have you worked with these firms in doing policy previously? Or have you talked to any neighboring districts and who have they used?
I have not.
Okay.
I know that Troon has said that they've worked with, 70 different school districts in Michigan. Neola, because they work with MASB, their service was, I think the number was 500 plus districts that they have worked with in the state of Michigan. If you would like, I can reach out to our neighboring districts and ask them if they've used either or and get some feedback.
Penny's got
Penny
something.
has, yeah.
I know in Taylor, when I was in Taylor, we did use Neola and we did rewrite all of our board policies. So we did go through that year-long process where the Neola representative came in and walked through the board, walked through the policies with the board, making those selections.
Okay, thank you for
Mhm.
that.
Just curious, the variance of 9 months between the two, what gives? One is 3 months, one's a full year. I'm just trying to wrap my mind around why.
I think one is more in-person time with somebody explaining the process versus the
There
other
you
one
go.
giving you a homework assignment and then coming back to review choices and answer questions.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I guess I'm also looking, well, like Mr., not just the time, I mean, cost-wise as well. I know that, just looking at really the initial support options are, so there's a 24-hour consultation with, but then check-in 2 times per year after implementation. I'm just looking at, again, the difference in the cost. We use them currently, correct? That's the attorney the office that we use currently for our
They're
for our
one of
needs.
the two.
So there's some familiarity there, and then the time for implementation and all of that. There's a lot to consider, but at the same time, I guess I'm looking at the fact that we already currently have a relationship with one of them. And I'm just going over it. I'm kind of just talking out loud as well, but I'm kind of looking over the, I mean, it's just a huge difference in cost as well.
When are we gonna bring this to vote?
I mean, I'll, whenever you'd
Is it
like
gonna
to see
come
it.
to vote?
I don't believe it needs to come to vote because it'll be one of the purchase items. It'll be in the confirming of purchase orders,
Okay.
but it's not something the board has to vote on
Okay.
to bring, because we're not.
I guess my thing is to make sure that the support is there and that they go through
Correct.
the whole process with us to make sure that every policy is understood. That would be my
Yeah.
biggest
agree.
concern. So whichever one is going to take more time to do that, that's personally who I would want to go with, but
I would say the same. So it looked, just from what I looked at, looked like Neola had more experience, dealt with this a lot more, and provided more support. Obviously, there was a huge difference in cost, but that's what you get when you want the better service, right? So, yeah, I would say that one too.
When you-
I was just gonna say, in the yearly upkeep on those policies, if you look at that cost breakdown, it's roughly the same. So when they're updating those policies yearly based on any legislation that's
They're gonna bill you
changing,
each
they're
time
about the
anyway, right,
same. Mhm.
Right.
And if I could, frankly, because it has been so many years since these policies have been worked on, A, we need to do it yesterday, and B, I expect there to be a large amount of work where if we had worked on a regular basis, it would not be as big of a project.
So if it's okay with the board, I'm gonna ask Dr. Lazar to reach out to some of her colleagues in the HR in Wayne County, ask what they've used, and then we can come back to the board and we can just do it through a memo. This is the firm we decided to go with.
Sounds good.
And this is the reasoning. Please let us know if you have any questions.
Well, then, can I ask this question to make it fair? Can we get in touch with Thurn and let them know what the board's expectation is and see if they want to work with the, you know?
Again,
Fun.
like she said, they would be willing to do as much of that as was required, but it would be based off of their billable hours. So you could have that support, it
So it
would
could
just be
be-
at the billable rate.
Neola's all inclusive,
Okay.
so it's going to the whole Hyatt in Jamaica or going to Sandals.
Do we, would Gary be involved in this, or?
No, Truen is different. Gary's part of a different firm.
Do you
Okay.
want Neola here?
Well, Neola would have to, yeah, they would have to.
Present? No, I mean-
Yeah.
If you'd like them to come and present
That
prior
would be
to making a
great, yeah.
final
Yeah.
decision, I can reach
Yeah.
out to him and ask him to do
Actually, can they
that.
both present? So we can
I
make a.
can
oh,
reach out and see.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, that would be good. Thank you.
Yep.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions from the board before we move on out of this closed session? I'm sorry, this study session? Okay. Motion to adjourn? Anybody support?
Support?
Okay, Ms. Janoon, please take roll call. What time is it? 6:58.
Mrs. Berry?
Yes.
Mrs. El Zayat is absent. Mrs.
Absent.
Fawaz?
Yes, here.
Myself, Mrs. Kaminsky,
Yes.
and Mr. Sable.
Yes.
Okay, we are adjourned at 6:59.
59? Okay, thank you. See you in a couple minutes.